What the hell did I just watch? Holy smokes, what did I just watch? This is it. This is the worst. The worst of the worst. I don't know what to say about what I have just witnessed. I literally felt my soul be sucked out of my body after seeing this movie. So, I'm going to share my pain and suffering with you as I am going to introduce you to the nightmare that is The Jar. Let's start the review.
His name is Henry. He's all about those classics. Dust off the old ones and gives them shine. He finds some goodies and finds you some baddies. And reviews ones folks from forgot. His name is Henry. He's all the
Happy done, I tell you. Happy done.
Before I dive into this thing I quite hesitate to call a movie, let us take a good look at the VHS covers. First, let's take a look at this tagline on the cover. It blows the lid off terror. It definitely blows, but in a different way. And what's with that monster in the jar? Is this supposed to be like a rip-off of the Ghoulies? And what is that gooey white substance coming out of the jar? Do I even want to know? Is this supposed to be like a take on The Stuff? Or I guess it looks better than whatever the hell this VHS poster, which makes it look like this person gets trapped in the jar with an eyeball and what looks like a tentacle. Stop beating around the bush, and I never wanted to avoid something so much in my lifetime. But let us dive in. Let us dive in to The Jar, the tragic story of a filmmaker who had the best intentions, but to quote Alan Grant from Jurassic Park 3,
some of the worst things imaginable have been done with the best intentions.
well, this movie's plot, or let's say its poor attempt at a plot, is about Paul, who gets into a car accident and brings home a man with a jar. And this jar has a demon in it, which causes Paul to go stir crazy and have dreams and hallucinations. So, what are my thoughts on The Jar? Well, I am not exaggerating. I am being 100% serious when I tell you that The Jar is the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. I'm not even joking when I tell you that this film makes Manos the Hands of Faith look like Citizen Kane. At least Manos, The Hands of Faith had Torgo and the Master to entertain me. This movie doesn't even have that going for it. It's not even so bad it's good like Plan 9 from Outer Space or Who Killed Captain Alex. It's just so bad that it's abysmal. How does a film this bad come into existence? Well, this film comes from the mind of Bruce Castano and George Bradley. Both of them were huge movie-making nerds. Hell, they were such big movie nerds that Bruce would constantly read books on filmmaking. Both of them had dreams in making it in filmmaking, and when they were younger, they used to go to the theater. Their favorite film was Suspiria. The idea came from George Bradley. The original title for the film was Charon, and they shot the film every scene in one shot, which I don't think I need to explain why that's a bad idea. Even when you take pictures, you have to take more than one shot. And they were filming with a camera that could not record audio, so they had to dub all the dialogue in post. Hell, they didn't even have a monster until halfway through filming. The film ended up being distributed by Magnum Entertainment, who really hated the film, as they ended up putting the film on VHS, giving it the generic title of The Jar and changing the film's original title. Neither of these two even know it was released on VHS until George Bradley went to a video store. They both watched it and were horrified because they filmed the whole movie in a widescreen, and the VHS cropped a lot of the footage. Both of them hated the final product so much that they gave up on filmmaking and art in general. Most people who saw the movie on VHS, viewers and critics, ended up trashing the movie, and it got the title as one of the worst movies ever made. One of these critics ended up being the team at Red Letter Media, who called it one of the worst films they ever seen, and even melted the VHS. And keep in mind, these are the same guys who made the Mr. Plinkett reviews. Videos I can't even stand. So when even I'm agreeing with them, you know there's something wrong. Terror Vision ended up releasing this film on Blu-ray and even got in touch with Bruce Toscano, who thought it was some kind of a joke, but nope, they were being serious. And they ended up releasing the film on Blu-ray, fixing a lot of the footage. And I want to say this, Bruce, George, as someone who's a fellow animation filmmaker, I want to say to one filmmaker to another, I'm happy for you. I'm happy you got your dream come true. Unfortunately, your dream pretty much became my worst nightmare. The music for The Jar, if you even want to call it that, was done by Obscure Signs. And what a fitting name, given how they never did anything after this movie. The music for the jar is more on par with something like Bulgarian Treasure Planet or Manos the Hands of Faith, where they loop the same music track or whatever music track they have over and over again, and it sounds like it was recorded off a Casio keyboard. I mean, listen. Don't get me wrong, looping music over and over again is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, look at something like Jaws. It loops the same music, but this is less John Williams music and feels more like music from an LJN NES game. We're introduced to our main character, Paul, who supposedly gets into a car accident and finds a man in said car accident who keeps telling him to bring his jar, even though he refers to it as a bottle. Or at least I said supposedly because this whole scene is shot so damn dark. And he decides, for whatever reason, to bring him back to his apartment. And he keeps the jar with him. And for whatever reason, the guy just disappears. And despite all the warning signs put in front of him, Paul decides to open the jar. What does he find in this jar? Well, the demon. And I would say that this thing looks like a poorly made puppet, but it's not even a puppet. Its mouth doesn't even move. It doesn't even growl. The only thing it does is just move its body a little bit, and that's about it. This thing looks less like a puppet and is more on par with a gelatin you would get on Halloween. Talk about our main character, Paul. And calling this guy a character is an insult to the word character. This guy has next to no personality outside of just being weird. And no respect to Gary Wallace, the actor who plays him. I've seen him on the documentary and he looks like a nice guy, but my God, is his acting some of the worst acting I have ever seen put to screen. He makes Tommy Wiseau look like Laurence Olivier with lines like this.
Damn you! I'm not gonna let you keep haunting me! I'm not gonna let you tear me apart! Get out! Get! You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
To tell you that this movie isn't a movie. This is a series of dream scenes and art house sequences. And the first one being where Paul's bathtub gets filled up with blood, which looks like Campbell tomato soup, and it gets filled up, and we get a shot of said kid coming out of that bathtub. Next one is where Paul goes out to throw away the jar only to see himself as Jesus Christ in a dumpster. What? And another one includes him going to a park where he sees a bunch of kids and a little girl lifting a balloon. And the next one is him going into a dream scene which is shot in black and white with a kid, an 80s looking kid who's dressed like a greaser. And another one has him entering this church where we see this kid and some priest is holding a bunch of cards. And I know what your reaction to hearing all this is. And wait, there's more! As he, in another dream, ends up on Diet Coke Arrakis straight from Dune, complete with the sisterhood. If I were to tell you that Diet Coke Arrakis and sisterhood cosplayers are not the most confusing part of this movie, whereas next we have a Vietnam flashback scene. Why, of course! Why the hell not at this point? And we have a dude drinking champagne like he's in a champagne commercial. And this whole Vietnam flashback is so cheap they could only afford 2 guns between them. And Paul gets saved by a helicopter. The only question I'm asking is, did Paul even deserve this? I mean, all we know about him is that he works in a lab, and even that's in a throwaway line of dialogue. We don't know what his life was like at the lab. Well, who were his friends? Was he a nice guy? Was he an asshole? It's almost like this movie is scared of the concept of character development. Not to mention, this film is not original. It tries to rip off Gus Van Sant's Eraserhead with the dreamlike imagery. It rips off Phantasm twice, including having its own tall man. It rips off Creepshow. And of course, with the visual style, it rips off Suspiria, and again, Creepshow with the color filters. Not like the actual visual style is that much better. It's so dull and boring. You would get more visual variety at looking at a white wall for an hour. Not to mention, this film is so boring. There are long stretches where nothing, I repeat, nothing happens. He walks down the street, goes to see See's Candy, which is an actual candy, by the way. He goes out of the candy store. There's another long stretch where he's eating his food. And next up, we have the only thing in this movie that actually has a pulse, Crystal. And she's the only character to have something resembling a personality. She's bubbly, she's cheerful, and the actress who plays her is the only one who tries and succeeds in this role. And she's the only one who would go on to do anything after this movie. Crystal must really be desperate for a boyfriend, because once she's told time and time again what Paul is going through, she's like, Sure, what time you want to see each other, at 8? She just shrugs it off. Oh golly, is their romance ever hard to believe? Why she's even into this guy. Look on the bright side, at least Crystal's dubbing is pretty good. Yeah, I forgot to mention, almost every character who has a speaking line in this movie is dubbed like it's an anime or a poorly dubbed foreign film. It's the worst dubbing I've ever seen that's not a foreign film. And it's really distracting whenever it does happen. Up is the second thing this movie has to having a pulse, that being Jack, Paul's boss. He is the closest this film gets to becoming so bad it's hilarious. His dubbing is hilarious. And some of the dialogue he's given is funny as hell. Like this line of dialogue.
You look like you've been worked over by Hell's Angels.
What the hell? He literally references the Hell's Angels, which is a biker gang. This movie also has the worst ending I have ever seen. Like, Crystal is hugging Paul, and she turns into the tall man, and then in a poorly shot scene, Paul strangles Crystal, and we see Crystal is dead. And then we see a shot of Crystal's face inside of a flower plant or whatever. And then he screams, and then we see Jack come in, and he sees the demon, and then he screams.
That's it?
Yep, that is it. That's how this movie ends, and it cuts to the credits. No, seriously, that's how this movie ends. There's no sequel or spin-off to this, so you're just left confused. Like, did Jack become possessed by the jar demon? Ugh. I think this goes without saying, but skip it, skip it, skip it, skip it. Do not watch this movie. And if you do watch it, make sure you have some snacks and a gallon of chocolate chip. And I'm giving this movie not even 0 stars. I'm giving this movie the first rating and the only rating I will give to any movie that has no redeeming values. This thing gets the skull of 0 redemption. You know what? After what I had to endure for this review, I'm gonna need a huge palate cleanser. So tune in as I go back to my roots and re-review the very first 4 movies I've ever covered on 20th Century Reviews. Stay tuned for Memory Lane Month. Until then, I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache, and I'm just gonna go lay down.